Well, hello again everyone. This is the last video, the last week. You'll be working on paper 3. We're ending on the note of doing a research paper because you're going to be transitioning into a research-based class. And the school asks us all to do something a little research-based at the very end of the 101 class so that you have a nice little transition over. So this is going to be more of an introduction to doing research papers than anything. It's not going to be super rigorous. I'm just going to be asking you to do some very difficult things, but just on a very introductory level. So you'll notice that you're being asked to write an argumentative paper, but it's research-based. So you can't really go into this paper knowing what thesis that you're going to have and then just going in to argue it. I'm going to be asking you to argue from peer-reviewed literature, which is a strange idea, I know. What is peer-reviewed literature? Well, peer-reviewed literature is stuff that has been written article length, so between 2 and 40 some odd pages long articles, where people who are professionals in a field write research-based argumentation, and then they send it to a journal that is in that field. So for instance, I work in the field of Christian education, and I work in the field of Native American literary studies. Both of those have 2 or 3 journals in the world that are peer-reviewed, publishable, that contain all of the new information that gets accepted every year on those subjects. Maybe there's a few more extra journals, but the big ones, there's usually like 2, 3, maybe 4 big journals in those fields that you try to get published in. And how it works is you send in the draft of your article, your research paper, and then it gets read by an editor who figures out exactly what it's about. He doesn't do anything other than that. And that person goes ahead and sends that on to a couple peer reviewers. Those peer reviewers are people in your field who are PhDs, studied in that field. They can validate whether your thoughts stand up to rigorous testing. If both of them agree, both of those peer reviewers who are blind, they have no idea who you are, you don't know who they are. If they both agree that your article is publishable, they'll send back feedback on how you can revise it to fit the journal and maybe to brush up on some weak ideas that you had. And then it gets published, and that's how we keep everyone honest. Blind peer reviewing, peer-reviewed articles are not paid, they are volunteer-based. So everyone in the fields that I work in volunteers as experts in the field. They're accepted by a journal. They go through that rigorous process, revision, and being accepted, and then you get published. And so that's how you know that peer-reviewed articles are sanctified by that field as being legit. Do mistakes still get made? Maybe sometimes, but not very often. These are very legit ways of verifying that you're reading something that has a lot of teeth to it. So I'm going to be asking you to do that kind of research. Generally, your research has been Google or whatever. You can get good stuff off there. More opinion-based stuff usually, hard to cite how legit it is. Peer-reviewed stuff is about as legit as it gets out here in the world of academics. It's how you know that people have been put through their paces. And when you read these articles, you're going to see just how hard work it is to put one together, one of these publishable essays. You're probably going to have, 30, 40, 50, 60 citations of books and articles, and they're all going to be used in this article that's peer-reviewed in order to make a case. That's a lot of work goes into it. So I'm going to be asking you to dive into that peer-reviewed world. The library has access to databases through the school. You can simply go onto the database. It's called EBSCOhost. It hosts a whole bunch of databases with a whole bunch of different fields, journals, and online copies of all of the articles in those journals. If you're having any trouble understanding the peer-reviewed article search guidelines, go ahead and contact me and we'll work through it. I'm only asking you to use 2 articles. So I want you to find a topic that you're interested in, search around on EBSCOhost, do a little digging, and then find 2 articles. They need to disagree with each other on something. So you're going to try to find an article that argues one thing and then an article that argues the opposite, or something near the opposite, right? Along those lines. So when you get into like fields like the easiest one to go to, and you don't have to choose this, I encourage you not to choose it because it gets written about so much. Everyone's a little tired of it. But the topic of gun control is the easy one. There are peer-reviewed articles that argue for use statistics and logic to argue for why certain regulations should exist, and articles that do the same thing and argue that those regulations should not exist. That's a pretty easy example. But really, whatever you're interested in. I've had a student do a paper on how plants respond to sound. I've had students do papers on the kind of food they eat and the health benefits. Had a paper on vaping last year, so all sorts of stuff. But you're going to be a little thrown off because these are really intense, well thought through articles, right? So when you're going into this research, you got to take out of your mind that you already know what you're going to find, because you're not going to find what you think you're going to find. I can almost promise you that. As you're searching around, you're going to find that some things in popular discourse that we fight over are settled in articles. Like scientific stuff like global warming is a big one for people to take on. I'm asking you to find evidence for and against things. If you go on to a scholarly database, over 99% of peer-reviewed work is going to explain to you how global warming is working and what it is. There's almost and maybe literally no one in the field who actually has any article saying that there's any evidence at all that global warming doesn't happen and that it's not caused by certain things that humans do. So that's one of those ones in popular discourse where people are always arguing that it's not true. But you will not find peer-reviewed work by scientists who review each other and check each other's facts that says that it's not real. You will not find it. So you're going to have to do a lot of searching to find what kind of arguments are actually out there. An example that I like to use is that you can look into the effects of meat on your health, right? So a lot of people in popular discourse like to argue eating meat's bad for your arteries, or other people argue eating meat has nothing to do with your arteries and isn't bad for you. That argument on its own is broad and dumb and useless and false. The reality of it, if you look into scientific work, you research the effects of meat on your body, on your arteries, on your heart, you're going to find that they do more specific research. So specific kinds of animals' meat, specific cuts of meat from that animal have different effects on your arteries. Some kinds of red meat, some cuts of red meat from certain animals will do a lot of damage to your arteries. Other cuts of red meat, maybe even from the same animal, if it's a special cut of meat off that animal, scientific evidence has found that it has little to no effect at all on your arteries. So this is the kind of stuff I'm asking you to do. I'm asking you to research how people are arguing over the effects of these things on your body, because there's certain cuts of meat, because of how complicated it is to track their effect on your body, that people argue that this cut has a negative effect and someone else is arguing that it doesn't, and they're presenting their evidence scientifically so that they can get to the bottom of it. Not so that one can be right and the other can be wrong, but so that they can fight their evidence against each other. Is often what you do in science, is present strong arguments so that you can get to the real truth, because the contradiction is not going to exist. They're going to figure it out and they're going to find out what's actually true here, but they have to go through that process first. So this is what I'm asking you all to do. It's going to be really tricky, like I said. I'm asking you to submit the names, the citations of those articles to me in a form that I can verify that you found two peer-reviewed articles and that they disagree with each other. And once you submit those to me and I give them the green light, which I'll get to as quickly as I can, you can move forward on writing your paper. You have an annotated bibliography example so that you see how to do your annotated bibliography that's going to be asked of you. I'm going to make this real simple for you. An annotated bibliography is just a list of summaries of the sources you're going to use. You're only required to use 2 sources in this paper, so your annotated bibliography is only going to be 2 sources long. The example shows you exactly what it looks like, but it's MLA citation, followed by summary of the article, MLA citation of the next article, followed by the summary of that article. That's all you're doing. So it's just two summaries put right next to the citations of the article that they're from. Asking you to do summaries of these articles so that I can see, just like with our last paper, that you understand what's being argued in the paper. The worst thing is to write a paper where you integrate sources and then come to find that you misquoted them. We already talked about this previously. It just ruins your credibility. But it's going to be an exploratory argumentative paper because you're not going to know exactly what argument you're joining until you do research. When you're interested in a topic, you should search it on EBSCOhost, look around, and figure out what people are saying. And once you get the vibe of what people are saying, you can join the conversation. You're going to find that you're probably very misinformed or underinformed about whatever conversation you're looking up. So that's where the exploration is going to be. You're going to learn a lot about the topic that you're researching because you're going to be jumping into a professional conversation. And then in the paper, I know that it's you're not going to have done enough research to say something original, but I want you to jump in and use your voice in the end of this argumentation paper. I want you to add an idea or push back against an idea or take someone's side of the two articles that you found. As always, there's an optional Zoom meetup. If you're having trouble writing this paper or doing research, please meet with me. I will make myself available.